July 10th, 1943. Somewhere outside Gela, Sicily. 0618 in the morning. The air already smells wrong. Not cordite yet, not fully. It's oil, burnt rubber, hot metal cooling too fast. A Sherman tank sits half-sunken in Sicilian mud, its tracks twisted like a broken spine. The engine compartment is open. Steam hisses softly, like the tank is breathing its last breath. Private First Class Joseph Joe Mancini, U.S. Army Ordnance Department, wipes his hands on a grease-blackened rag and stares into the engine bay. The engine should be dead. By every rule Germany ever wrote about armored warfare, this tank should be dead. Joe leans closer anyway. You can almost feel the heat coming off the steel. The flies already know something is wrong. Behind him, artillery rumbles inland. The invasion is still unfolding. Somewhere beyond the hills, German panzer crews are doing what they've trained for their entire adult lives. Precise movements, exact tolerances, doctrine perfected over years. Joe doesn't care about any of that. He reaches into the engine compartment and pulls out a bent fuel line. It shouldn't fit, but it does. Joe Mancini isn't an engineer. He isn't a designer. He didn't attend a war college. 3 years ago, he worked in a Packard automobile plant in Detroit. 8 hours a day, same motions, same tools, same parts sliding down an assembly line that never stopped. When the Army drafted him, they didn't ask about courage. They didn't ask about tactics. They asked what he could fix. Now, in a field that was an olive grove a week ago, Joe swaps a damaged component with one pulled from a wrecked Sherman 50 yards away. No machining, no precision fitting, no factory tools, just bolts, threads, torque. He tightens the last nut and nods to the driver. Try it. The engine coughs. Once. Twice. Then it roars back to life. A tank that should be abandoned rolls forward again. And Joe doesn't know it yet, but in that moment, he has solved a problem Germany never will. Less than 10 miles away, Oberlieutenant Karl-Heinz Vogel, 15th Panzergrenadier Division, surveys the battlefield through binoculars. He sees American tanks burning. He sees others advancing. That part doesn't bother him. What bothers him is how many keep coming back. German doctrine says a disabled tank is effectively removed from combat. Precision engines, tight tolerances, specialized parts. Repairs are meant for workshops, not fields. Vogel watches as a Sherman that was hit earlier in the morning moves again. Then another. Then another. He lowers the binoculars slowly. That shouldn't be possible. Back in the mud, Joe Mancini lights a cigarette with shaking hands. The adrenaline is still there. Someone shouts his name. Another tank needs help. He tosses the cigarette away and jogs toward the sound of grinding gears. He doesn't know he's part of a revolution. He just knows the tanks have to keep moving. And they will. Because this war isn't about who builds the best machine anymore. It's about who can keep broken machines alive. And Germany is about to learn that lesson the hard way.
The second Sherman doesn't look as lucky. Its right track is shredded. The suspension arm hangs at an angle no one designed for. Oil drips steadily into the dirt, darkening the Sicilian soil inch by inch. Joe slides under the hull anyway. The ground is still warm from the night before. Somewhere above him, the engine ticks as it cools. You can hear distant rifle fire now, sharper, closer. The front line is breathing down their necks. "Clock's against us," someone mutters. Joe doesn't answer. He's staring at the suspension assembly, fingers tracing bent metal, already sorting parts in his head. What can be replaced? What can be ignored? what can be forced to work just long enough. This is not how German tanks are meant to be repaired, and that is exactly the point. 2 continents away, before the war, German engineers obsessed over perfection. Their tanks were marvels, tight tolerances, advanced optics, engines that delivered power efficiently and precisely, as long as conditions were ideal. But ideal conditions don't exist in war. In North Africa, fine sand clogged filters. On the Eastern Front, winter cracked seals and froze lubricants. Now in Italy, dust, mud, heat, and uneven terrain do their quiet damage. Every German tank is a finely tuned instrument. Every American tank is a tool, and tools are meant to be abused. Joe yanks himself out from under the hull, face streaked with grime. "This arm's shot," he says, "but the mount'll hold." The tank commander hesitates. "Doctrine says—" Joe cuts him off. "Doctrine doesn't matter if you're walking." They cannibalize parts from another disabled Sherman. Same bolts, same threads, same fit. The arm goes on crooked, not factory perfect, but solid enough. German engineers would flinch. Joe tightens until his wrench screams. That's good enough. Across the battlefield, Oberlieutenant Vogel receives a report. Another engagement, another American tank formation, losses inflicted. But still, they keep advancing. A Panzer IV sits immobilized behind his position. Its transmission failed. The part required is specific, serial number matched, precision machined. The repair crew waits and waits. The part will not arrive today, maybe not tomorrow. That tank is finished. Vogel stares toward the American lines, frustration crawling up his spine. How are they still moving? The repaired Sherman lurches forward, not smoothly, not elegantly, but it moves. Joe watches it go, chest tightening with something that feels dangerously close to pride. This is what Detroit taught him. You don't build something that never breaks. You build something that can be fixed by a tired man, in bad weather, under fire. As the sun climbs higher, the battlefield fills with noise. More Shermans roll forward, scarred, patched, mismatched. Some with spare track links welded where they don't belong. Some with engines rebuilt twice already. Each one is a compromise. Each one is still alive. German gunners destroy some. They always will. But others keep coming. And for the first time, a terrifying idea begins to spread through the German ranks. What if destroying the tank isn't enough anymore? What if breaking it doesn't stop it? Joe wipes his hands again. Another tank is calling for help. He grabs his tools and runs. He doesn't hear the sound beneath the gunfire. It's quieter. It's the sound of a doctrine cracking.
By mid-afternoon, the battlefield has changed shape, not because of territory gained or lost, but because of what refuses to stay dead. Burned-out hulks mark the earlier hours of the fight. Blackened steel, cooked ammunition. German gunners know those shapes well. They're comforting, final. But scattered among them are tanks that should not be moving. Yet they are. A Sherman with a mismatched road wheel clatters forward, suspension whining like an injured animal. Another crawls over a shallow ditch, one exhaust stack missing entirely. Smoke pours from places smoke shouldn't come from. Still, they advance. Oberlieutenant Vogel rubs grit from his eyes and checks his watch. This is wrong. His company has scored clean hits. He has confirmation reports. He has counted burning wrecks. By all logic, by every lesson drilled into him since officer school, the American armored thrust should be slowing. Instead, it is thickening. "Where are they getting replacements?" someone asks behind him. Vogel doesn't answer, because the truth is worse. They're not replacements. In a shallow depression near the beachhead, Joe Mancini kneels beside a pile of parts laid out on a poncho.
A carburetor from one tank, a starter motor from another, fuel pumps pulled from 3 different vehicles. None of them match serial numbers. All of them fit. His hands move on instinct now, muscle memory from factory floors, not battlefields. The rhythm of assembly work follows him even here. Bolt, tighten, check clearance, move on. An officer approaches, helmet low, eyes tired. "How many you got running?" Joe thinks. Depends what you mean by running. The officer doesn't smile. Joe jerks his thumb toward the line. Enough. This is not heroism. It's arithmetic. America is not asking whether a tank can be repaired perfectly. America is asking how fast it can be returned to the fight. German armored doctrine assumes scarcity. Each tank is precious, each loss matters, each repair must restore the machine to exact standards. American doctrine assumes volume. Losses are expected, breakdowns are normal, repairs don't need to be elegant, they need to be fast. And once you accept that, the math changes. Vogel receives another report. Enemy armor sighted again, same sector, same direction. His adjutant hesitates. "Sir, some of these vehicles may be previously damaged units." Vogel looks up sharply. "Define damaged." The adjutant swallows. "Hit, disabled, repaired." Vogel's jaw tightens. Repaired? Where? The answer is uncomfortable. They are not being repaired behind the lines. They are being repaired inside the battle, by men who were never trained to fear imperfection. Joe wipes sweat from his eyes. His hands are blistered now. The skin along his knuckles is split and blackened. Another engine turns over successfully. Another tank moves. No one cheers. There is no celebration. They simply move on to the next one, because there is always a next one. As evening approaches, German resistance stiffens. Panzerfausts crack, anti-tank guns bark, Shermans burn. But behind the line, more are being dragged back, stripped, rebuilt, sent forward again. The cycle does not stop. And Vogel begins to understand something far more dangerous than enemy fire. He is not fighting machines. He is fighting a system. One that does not care if something breaks, only that it can be replaced faster than it can be destroyed. That night, as the battlefield cools and the wounded are evacuated, Joe sits on an ammo crate and finally lets his hands shake. He counts the tanks. More than he should have, more than makes sense. Somewhere out there, German officers are doing the same math and realizing, too late, that precision cannot compete with abundance. But Sicily is only the beginning, because what Joe is doing in the mud today will soon be happening in France, in Germany, everywhere American armor rolls. And when that happens, the war will cross a line it can never uncross.
Night comes slowly in Sicily. The heat lingers, trapped in metal and stone. Engines tick as they cool. Somewhere out in the dark, a German artillery battery fires a probing barrage, not to destroy, just to remind the Americans they are still there. Joe Mancini lies on his back beneath a Sherman, staring up at a silhouette of steel against a starless sky. He should be exhausted. He is. But sleep won't come. Because tomorrow, this all happens again. Across the lines, Oberleutnant Vogel sits at a folding table under a canvas tarp, lit by a single lantern. A map is spread before him. Red grease pencil marks show where American armor was destroyed, and then destroyed again, and then somehow present again. He taps the map with a finger. "These tanks," he says quietly, "they are not supposed to behave this way." A senior NCO shifts uncomfortably. "Perhaps their crews are reckless." Vogel shakes his head. "No, reckless men don't come back from mechanical failure." He pauses, choosing his words carefully. These machines are designed to forgive mistakes. The lantern flickers. That idea unsettles everyone at the table. German armor doctrine is built on mastery. The panzer crews Vogel commands are trained to treat their vehicles like instruments, tuned, calibrated, respected. Maintenance schedules are strict. Repairs are meticulous. Improvisation is discouraged, because improvisation introduces risk. But war introduces risk whether you allow it or not. And now Vogel is facing an enemy that has accepted chaos and engineered around it. Joe crawls out from under the tank and sits up slowly. His back screams in protest. The tank commander hands him a canteen. "You ever worked this hard back home?" Joe takes a long drink. "Nah. Then why's it work here?" Joe thinks for a moment. Because back home, if something broke, the line didn't stop. You fixed it fast, or someone behind you did. Either way, the cars kept coming. The commander nods, not fully understanding, but feeling the truth of it. Joe adds quietly, "Same thing here." Germany builds tanks the way it builds watches. America builds tanks the way it builds tractors. One is elegant. The other survives mud. The next morning, the Germans counterattack. Panzer IVs roll forward, guns barking. Their optics are excellent, their crews disciplined. They score hits early. Shermans burn. Again. But then something strange happens. American tanks begin appearing where none were expected. Units thought eliminated rejoin the fight. Formations reform faster than intelligence reports can keep up with. Vogel watches through binoculars as a Sherman crests a ridge, its hull scarred, track lengths mismatched, one fender missing entirely. He recognizes it. He is sure of it. That tank was knocked out yesterday. His hand tightens around the binoculars. "This is impossible," he whispers. But it isn't. It is industrial logic applied to warfare. Joe is back in the mud by noon. A gearbox swap, a cracked radiator patched with solder and hope, a starter motor coaxed into life with a hammer blow that would horrify an engineer. Each fix is temporary. Each fix is enough, and enough is all that matters. German maintenance units struggle. Spare parts are limited. Manufacturing tolerances are too specific. Field improvisation risks cascading failures. Damaged tanks pile up behind the lines, waiting for the right component, waiting for perfection. America does not wait. America moves. By the end of the week, Vogel receives orders to withdraw. Not because his men lack courage, not because their tactics failed, but because the Americans cannot be stopped long enough to be exhausted. That realization settles heavily on him. This war will not be decided by superior machines. It will be decided which side can afford to lose them. That night, Joe finally sleeps, curled against a tank hull still warm from battle. Tomorrow, he will do it again. And somewhere far away, in Normandy, in the Ardennes, in Germany itself, thousands of other mechanics just like him will soon be doing the same thing. Because this wasn't a battlefield innovation, it was a philosophy finally unleashed. And Germany is about to face it everywhere.
The next breakdown happens before sunrise. A Sherman lurches to a stop at the edge of a dirt road, engine screaming once before going silent. The crew bails out, helmets clattering, breath fogging in the cool morning air. Joe Mancini is already moving. Not because he was called, because he expected it. He pops the engine hatch and immediately sees the problem. Cracked manifold, metal fatigue, too many hours at full throttle, too much heat, too much weight. In a German tank, this would be the end of the story. The vehicle would be logged, tagged, towed if possible. The correct replacement part would be requested. The crew would wait. Joe doesn't wait.
He reaches into his kit and pulls out a chalk stub, marks the crack, measures with his thumb, looks back toward a disabled Sherman 50 yards away. "Strip that manifold," he says, "now." Someone hesitates. "Sir, that one's from a different batch." Joe is already walking. "Doesn't matter." And it doesn't, because the batch doesn't matter. The design does. This is the part no one sees in the documentaries. The battles are loud, the tanks are visible, the explosions feel decisive. But the real fight is happening here, in the quiet space between breakdown and movement. And Joe is not special. That's the terrifying part. Back in Detroit before the war, engineers argued endlessly about tolerances. How tight was too tight, how precise was too precise, how much imperfection could be allowed before failure became unacceptable. The answer in peacetime was simple: very little. The answer in war was different: enough. Enough to function, enough to move, enough to fight today. Germany never solved that equation. Its industry was brilliant but fragmented. Small firms, specialized production, custom-fitted components, excellence built slowly and carefully. America built systems, gigantic ones. Factories that assumed workers would be replaced, machines that assumed parts would fail, designs that assumed damage was inevitable. Interchangeability was not a feature, it was the foundation. Joe bolts the salvaged manifold into place. It doesn't sit perfectly flush. He doesn't care. He tightens it anyway. The engine starts on the second try. The crew cheers. Joe doesn't. He's already reaching for his tools. Oberlieutenant Vogel reads the latest intelligence summary with growing dread. American armored units are advancing again. Casualties reported, losses confirmed, and yet operational strength remains high. His superior officer circles a line on the map. "This unit was destroyed 3 days ago." Vogel nods slowly. "No," he says, "it was damaged." The correction earns him a sharp look. Vogel meets it. They are not the same thing anymore. German tanks are designed to be superior. American tanks are designed to be replaceable. And when replaceability meets scale, superiority begins to matter less. Joe pauses long enough to drink from his canteen. His reflection stares back at him from the metal hull, hollow-eyed, grease-streaked, unremarkable. If you asked him what he was doing out here, he wouldn't say he was changing warfare. He'd say he was keeping the line moving. That's all he's ever known. As the Sicilian campaign grinds forward, the pattern repeats: breakdown, repair, return, over and over. German units begin to withdraw not because they are beaten tactically, but because they cannot recover fast enough to stay in the fight. Their machines are too precious. America's are expendable. And that difference is now impossible to ignore. Late one evening, Joe overhears 2 officers talking. They say this'll work in France, too. Fields, hedgerows, mud. Joe wipes his hands and looks up. "Yeah," he mutters, "it'll work anywhere." Because it isn't about terrain, it's about philosophy. And soon, that philosophy will roll ashore in Normandy, multiplied by thousands. When that happens, Germany will finally understand the full cost of choosing perfection over forgiveness. But by then, it will be far too late.
June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. Just after dawn. The beach smells like seawater, smoke, and fear. Shermans sit half submerged in sand and surf, engines whining as waves slap against their hulls. Some stall immediately. Salt water finds its way into places it shouldn't. Electrical systems short, transmissions grind. To German observers on the bluffs, it looks like failure. It isn't. It's rehearsal. Joe Mancini isn't on the first wave. He lands hours later with the second tide of men whose names never make headlines. Ordnance units, recovery crews, mechanics carrying tools instead of rifles.
The beach is chaos. Burning tanks, shattered landing craft, men shouting over engines that refuse to start. Joe drops to one knee beside a Sherman stuck nose down in wet sand. Same problem as Sicily, different continent. By noon, German reports claim dozens of American tanks destroyed or disabled. The numbers are correct. The conclusion is not. Because behind the dunes, mechanics are already at work. Tracks are cleaned, starters are replaced, engines are flushed, radios are swapped from one hull to another. A tank that drowned at 0700 is moving again by 1500. That should not be possible. Yet it happens, again and again. From a German command post inland, officers watch through field glasses. They expected chaos, they expected delay, they expected the beach to choke the Allied advance. Instead, they see something worse. They see momentum. Joe works without looking up. The rhythm is familiar now. Break, fix, move. Some of these tanks will last days, some only hours. It doesn't matter, because there are more behind them, always more. German armor in Normandy is formidable. Panthers with powerful guns, tigers that dominate open ground, crews trained for years, confident in their machines. But when a Panther throws a track or burns out its final drive, the story changes. Specialized parts are required, specialized crews, specialized time. Time Normandy does not give. A Sherman takes a hit near the bocage and limps back behind the line. The driver is shaking. Transmission's gone. Joe listens to the engine. No, he says, it's tired. He swaps parts from a wrecked tank nearby. The fit is rough, the solution inelegant. The tank moves again. The driver stares at him like he's seen a ghost. Joe shrugs. Don't baby it. German commanders begin to notice a pattern. Every engagement costs them tanks. Every engagement costs the Americans tanks too. But the Americans return. The Germans don't. A staff officer writes in his diary that night, "The enemy's strength does not seem to diminish no matter how many vehicles we destroy." It is not bravado, it is confusion. Joe sleeps in a hedgerow, tools beside him, boots still on. He dreams of conveyor belts, of parts sliding into place, of machines that never stop. By July, the Normandy front has turned into a grinder. Tanks die daily, but American armored divisions keep pressing forward, repaired faster than intelligence can track. German repair depots fall back again and again, unable to keep pace. Precision has met scale, and scale is winning. Joe watches a column of Shermans roll past at sunset. Some are new, some are patched together from 3 different wrecks. All of them are moving. Somewhere deep in German high command, the truth is finally being acknowledged. This war is no longer about tactical brilliance. It is about who can endure longer. And Germany cannot. The line breaks weeks later, not because of one battle, but because thousands of small decisions made by men like Joe have added up to something unstoppable. And now the road leads east, into Germany itself, where the lesson will be learned in steel and fire.
September 14th, 1944. Near Aachen. Early evening. Rain turns the road into soup. Shermans crawl forward anyway, engines low, tracks chewing through mud that would have swallowed earlier wars whole. One throws a track with a sharp metallic crack. The crew bails, practiced, efficient. No panic, no surprise. They've done this before. Joe Mancini arrives 10 minutes later, rain soaking through his jacket, tool bag heavy on his shoulder. The tank is blocking the road. That matters. German resistance here is stiff. This is home soil now. Every hedgerow feels defended. Every village is a knot of steel and concrete. And German tanks still hit hard. A panther fires from concealment, and a Sherman erupts in flame. The blast rocks the road. The panther reverses, then stops. Its engine screams once, then nothing. Joe hears it, that sound. He looks up from the disabled Sherman and stares toward the smoke rising near the village edge. "That one's done," someone says. Joe doesn't answer, because he knows what done means, and he knows what it doesn't. German recovery crews scramble under fire. The Panther's final drive has failed, a known weakness, meticulously engineered, exquisitely precise, catastrophically fragile. It requires specialized tools, factory-calibrated parts, time. They have none of those. The crew abandons the tank, a perfect machine, defeated by its own intolerance for imperfection. Joe finishes his repair, track back on, tension imperfect but workable. "Move it," he says. The Sherman lurches forward, clears the road, joins the column again. Behind it, more tanks follow. Ahead, German defenses thin. Lieutenant Vogel is here now, transferred, promoted, tired. He stands beside a road crater, staring at the abandoned Panther. It is immaculate, untouched by enemy fire, completely useless. He closes his eyes. This is the moment, the one no report can soften, no doctrine can explain away. They did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Joe walks past the Panther without stopping. He doesn't admire it, doesn't touch it, doesn't care. He's seen too many machines fail for beautiful reasons. That night, German units pull back again. Not routed, not destroyed, outlasted. Their tanks are better, their crews are skilled, but every breakdown costs them something they cannot replace: time. Joe sits on a crate, rain dripping off his helmet. A young mechanic sits beside him. "You ever think about after?" Joe shrugs. "After what? All this?" Joe watches another Sherman roll past, patched and scarred. "Machines'll still break," he says. "Someone'll still have to fix 'em." In the distance, fires burn inside German territory. The war has crossed a threshold, not with a single battle, but with a quiet realization spreading through every German maintenance unit, every armored command post, every factory struggling under bombing raids. Perfection is too slow, and slowness is fatal. Joe packs his tools. Tomorrow there will be more broken tanks and fewer German ones, because this war is ending the only way it can, not with a flawless design, but with a system that refuses to stop.
March 7th, 1945, west of the Rhine. Dawn. Fog clings to the river like a living thing. Shermans idle in long columns, engines muttering patiently, exhaust drifting low across the water. Some tanks are fresh from depots, others look like they've been fighting since Africa, because they have. Joe Mancini stands near the lead vehicle, hands deep in his pockets, watching condensation bead on steel that has crossed an ocean, a continent, and half of Germany. Somewhere ahead, engineers are arguing about bridges. Joe isn't listening. He's watching the tanks. One stalls. Of course it does. The crew doesn't swear anymore. They don't panic. They don't even look surprised. They just wave Joe over. This Sherman has been rebuilt so many times, its original factory configuration is a memory. The engine block is from one plant, the transmission from another. The starter motor was salvaged in France. The fuel pump came from a tank knocked out near Aachen. It should not exist, yet here it is. Joe swaps a fouled component, taps the housing with the flat of his wrench, and signals the driver. The engine catches, the tank rolls forward, and the column closes the gap without stopping. Across the river, German observers watch in silence. They no longer count destroyed vehicles.
They count how many stay gone, and the number is shrinking. German industry is exhausted. Factories are bombed, rail lines shattered, skilled labor scattered or dead. Replacement parts arrive late, if at all. Even when a German tank survives battle, it often dies alone afterward, immobilized by a failed component no one can replace. The machines are still excellent, but excellence has become irrelevant. Joe crosses the Rhine with the tanks. He barely notices. Rivers don't matter to him anymore, only whether the engine turns over. In a ruined German town days later, Joe passes a Panther abandoned in the street. Its hull is intact, paint unscarred. The crew fled after a mechanical failure. Someone has chalked a note on the armor in German. Keine Teile, no parts. Joe stares at it for a moment, then keeps walking. By April, resistance collapses in waves. Not dramatic last stands, just thinning lines, silent roads, empty repair depots. German officers surrender tanks that still have ammunition, fuel, crews, but no future. Joe repairs one last Sherman outside a small town whose name he never learns. The engine runs rough. It doesn't matter. The tank moves. That's enough. When the war ends weeks later, Joe is sitting on a crate cleaning his tools. No speeches, no celebration, just quiet. A young officer walks by and nods at the tanks parked along the road. "Hell of a machine," he says. Joe looks at the mismatched hulls, the welded patches, the scars. He shakes his head. Not the machine, the idea. Because long after the guns fall silent, armies around the world will study this war and miss the point. They'll debate armor thickness, gun caliber, horsepower. But the real lesson was simpler. The side that won didn't build perfection, it built forgiveness. And that idea will outlive every tank on this road.
May 9th, 1945. Southern Germany. Morning. The war is over. Not with a final shot Joe Mancini hears, but with a silence that feels heavier than any explosion. Tanks sit parked along a country road, engines cold for the first time in months. No one is in a hurry anymore. Joe kneels beside one out of habit, checking a loose bolt before realizing there is no next movement, no next push. It takes a moment for that to sink in. German prisoners march past under guard. Their uniforms are worn, their faces hollow. Some glance at the American tanks, at the patched armor, the mismatched parts, the sheer number of vehicles still operational. They look confused, as if they are seeing the answer to a question they were never allowed to ask. One former German tank officer pauses as he passes Joe. He gestures toward the Shermans. "They are not very good machines." Joe considers correcting him. He doesn't. "You're right," he says. "They aren't." The officer frowns. "Then how?" Joe wipes his hands on a rag, looks down the road at dozens more tanks stretching into the distance. "We didn't need them to be good. We needed them to keep going." The officer nods slowly. That answer hurts more than any insult. After the war, reports will be written, studies conducted, lessons extracted. Some will focus on numbers, some on logistics, some on air superiority. Few will mention Joe Mancini. None will mention the hundreds of thousands like him, men who never fired a shot in anger, men who won the war anyway. The future takes notes. Cold War armies redesign their equipment. Interchangeable parts become non-negotiable. Field maintenance becomes doctrine. Reliability is valued over brilliance. The idea spreads, not because it is elegant, because it works. Joe goes home to Detroit, back to factories, back to machines. He tells no stories. Why would he? Fixing things is just what he does. Years later, museums will display German tanks behind ropes and glass. People will admire the craftsmanship, the precision, the beauty. American tanks will look crude by comparison, rough, unremarkable. But only one of them changed how wars are fought, because wars are not won by machines that never break. They are won by machines that can be broken and brought back, again and again and again. That was the problem Germany never solved, and the American mechanic did. Not with genius, not with brilliance, but with a wrench, in the mud, under fire.